Hey everyone, how's it going? A couple days ago, I reached out to the community on LinkedIn to collect resumes. Why? Because I want to show you in this video how do you improve your resume from this to this. Let's get started. What up everyone? I'm Dan, the founder of DataInterview.com, ex-Google and PayPal data scientist. In this video, I want to give you the tips and the tricks to turn your resume into an effective one so that it stands out when you submit it to the job application. Now, this video is broken down into 5 parts. The first part I'd like to cover is how do you gain relevant data science experience so you can add these items in your resume. The second thing I'd like to provide is basically general tips in terms of what should you include in the education section, what should you include in the experience section, and how do you provide an effective statement of contribution that you made to projects. Next, I'll take a resume that was sent over to me and I'll provide a rundown in terms of what was great about the resume and what are some areas of improvement and show you the updated version of it where I made a revision myself. Lastly, I'm happy to announce that I'm launching a new service on DataInterview.com. So make sure you stick around until the end of the video to learn about what this new service is about. In order to have a data science resume, you have to first of all have experience. Without experience, you're not going to have much to place in your resume. So how do you go about gaining relevant experience for data science job? The number one thing is to, first of all, get a job in data science. Whether it's an internship or entry-level position, if you're currently a data scientist, then you are currently doing a project that you can definitely place in your resume. But really focus on the main KPI that comes out of that project. So what is the measurable impact did you deliver from the project that you work on? And that's something that you definitely need to include in the resume. The second source is pursue certifications in data science. One of the most popular ones out there right now is Google's data analytics certifications. It gives you hands-on experience in data analysis and machine learning. And based on what I've seen so far, it seems to be a hit among the data science community. So this is something that I highly recommend that you check it out. The third thing is really demonstrate your passion about data science by starting a blog. It could be in the form of some personal website or it could be a Medium blog. And you can find whatever project that inspires you. You can go on websites like 538 or you can go on Kaggle.com, find a project that interests you, download a data set, do data analysis or machine learning modeling, and showcase the work on your blog. Another great source as a way to gain relevant experience, but also gain some critique about your code, is contributing in open source libraries such as Pandas, sklearn, stats models. Those are some great ways you can build actual skills in data science. Now, the last tip that I like to provide, focus on students, is pursue academic studies. This is something that I myself did when I was pursuing a BS in statistics. I reached out to a professor in stats department to see if he'd be willing to sponsor me in an academic study. And I was able to do some statistical analysis about testing bias. And this gave me an opportunity to present the result in academic conferences. In addition to that, when it came time for me to interview for entry-level data science positions, I was able to explain some of the work that I did from this research. Now let's segue over to some general tips that's applicable for pretty much any data science resumes. The first tip I like to provide is that make sure your resume has consistent and simple font sizing and spacing. You want to ensure that your resume is presentable because this resume is your first impression to the dream company that you're applying for. The second tip I like to provide is that make sure you send your resume in a PDF file format and not other formats because one, you want to make sure that the recruiter can actually open the file. And the second thing is that if it's not in the file format that they're familiar with, what could happen is that when they open it, next thing you know, all of the spacing and the style is all jumbled up. So make sure that you send it in a PDF file. The next thing to consider is the length of your resume. Make sure it's not more than 2 pages. Last thing that you want is to have an encyclopedia about your entire work experience. And when you send out a resume like that, a recruiter is simply not going to read all of the pages. Now, when you're including details on your resume, make sure it's relevant to the job that you're applying. If the job requires some skills in Python, you happen to have Python skills, make sure you mention that in your resume. And if you don't currently have that, but you really want the job, then acquire that experience through the things that I just mentioned earlier in the video. Now, if you have a personal blog or a GitHub account with repositories or some contributions that you made to the open source community, well, that's great. Make sure you include links to those at the top of your resume. Depending on whether you're a student or you're a professional, how you lay out your resume is a little bit different. So if you're a student, make sure you place the education before the experience. So the experiences are going to include internships, for instance, or any other jobs that you might have had. Now, if you're an experienced professional, make sure you place your experience first and then place your education down below in your resume. Now, here's the last tip, and this is the most important one. When you're describing the projects you worked on, make sure you mention the quantifiable impacts that you provided through this project. So for instance, you could use the following formula. Accomplish X as measured by Y by doing Z. So here's a generic statement that's often stated in resume. Developed a classification model that prevents credit card fraud with 90% accuracy. Well, that's all great, but what was the business impact in terms of dollars? So this is when you can transform this generic statement into a measurable impact. You could say, saved a bank $1 million in Q4 2021 by developing a classification model that prevented credit card fraud with 90% accuracy. There are, of course, types of projects where it doesn't seem to have some quantifiable impacts. What you could do instead is, for instance, if you deliver a dashboard, you could list the number of teams or users that ended up using your dashboard and what were some key decisions that were made out of this dashboard. Let's talk about the resume that was sent over to me. So what I'm going to do is do a rundown in terms of what was great about the resume, what are some areas of improvement, and show you the improved version of it. So what's great about this resume? So the first thing is that the way she has her structure. So she starts with an overall description about her experience along with some skills. And then she talks about her experience, followed by leadership and awards, and then the education section. The second thing is that her resume is just a page. And the third thing is that she really highlights quantifiable impacts in the projects that she worked on. So what are some ways to improve a resume? When you take a look at the resume, it's a block of text. It's just too much information, all of it at once. So there are some ways in which you can kind of change the layout. In the revised version, I'll show you a cleaner version of this. The second thing is that in her summary section, she could definitely place what was the biggest win she achieved in her career in data science. Now, the next thing that she could definitely do is make her descriptors a lot more concise. So for instance, analyze historical 2-year facility supplies purchasing orders of 1K plus hub across US, built K-means clustering model based on package processing volume in Python to identify demand sequential patterns and contributed to $0.8 million potential annual savings. Okay, that is certainly a mouthful. The main idea here is that she applied a clustering algorithm that helped provide a $0.8 million potential annual saving. That is a main message. And this sentence could be transformed into the following, which is contributed to $0.8 million annual savings in facility purchase orders across FedEx hubs by delivering a clustering model based on packaged volume data. Now, I know there are often a lot of tendency out there to be overly specific about a project. Maybe you're trying to overcompensate by saying, hey, I did all of these things. But really focus on the main message here. What is the key measurable impact you delivered on that project in a very simple language? What did you do to achieve that? Now, the next suggestion I'd like to provide is that if you look at her skills section, she makes a list of specific machine learning algorithms that she's familiar with. I've often seen this in resumes. You don't really want to do this. Just make a general list of categories that you know. So if you know machine learning, if you know deep learning, or clustering, that's really all you need to list in your skill section. Now, when it comes time to the interview, then that's when you can be a little bit more specific about what particular type of algorithm that you use to work on that project. So now let's take a look at the improved version of a resume. So you right off the bat, you see that the format has changed quite a bit in order to make the resume a lot cleaner. The next thing is that when you look at the profile section, I've injected what would be considered as the most important contribution that she has made in her data science career. This really accentuates the biggest win that she achieved to the data science recruiter. The next thing is that you can see that in the descriptors of her most recent job, I reworded a number of things in order to add brevity, but also really highlight the impact. Instead of having the impact detail at the very end of the sentence, I start the descriptor with that. And lastly, I condense the number of algorithms as she mentioned in her resume. So there you have it, guys. So this is an illustration of how to use the techniques that I've provided in the video to transform a resume into a much effective one. If you're interested in receiving feedback on your resume, along with an improved version of it, check out DataInterview.com, where I launched a service that can help you create the perfect data science resume. And I'll see you in the next video.